Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. I'm your host, Travis, and I'm back in the saddle here. We just took a bunch of trips all over the place. We did a birthday trip down to South Carolina, and then I went as a +1 to my wife's medical conference and hung out with baby, watched baby while she did her medical conference. And wow, guys, like there's no COVID in South Carolina or Arizona. So interesting, right? I'm just joking. Anyways, this is the big episode that you've been waiting for. This is the PSLF Everything Expansion episode. This is nuts. I have to admit, I did not see something this aggressive coming out of the Biden administration on student loans. So this is a big freaking deal, a big bleeping deal, as President Biden has said in the past, right, about the Affordable Care Act. I don't know. I'm just in a kind of a weird, snarky, joking mood right now. But this is a big deal, to be serious. If you are a public servant of any kind, you need to pay attention to this. And you should tell all of your friends who are public servants about this opportunity as well, because you might help change one of your friends' lives over this. Let's just say in plain English what the Biden administration did on public service loan forgiveness with this executive action a couple weeks ago. So here's the big takeaway. A lot of people had payments that did not count or had loans that did not count for various reasons. Loans that did not count were generally because it's FFEL loans that are taken out 2010 or before. Payments that didn't count for various reasons, like maybe Fed loan rounded the payment down by a penny instead of up by a penny. Maybe the payment was late. Maybe the payment was made on something like the extended or the graduated payment plan instead of an income-based repayment plan. There's all these reasons why people were not qualifying for public service loan forgiveness. And, you know, we know the infamous 1% approval rate story that the media kind of led with that was really quite inaccurate because of the people applying were the ones that didn't know they didn't qualify. And I mean, yeah, it was a messed up program in the sense that they've designed it poorly. I think that Congress didn't have any clue what they were doing back in 2007. That's one of the reasons why we have this problem, is because Congress, I think, thought, okay, we're going to make this narrow forgiveness program, and it's turned into this massive thing. And a lot of the times when they expand it and change it, they do so via executive order. They do that to bypass Congress because it's a lot easier to do it. But when you do it, then there's all these extra restrictions on what you can do and for how long and the term limit of it expiring. And it creates like layers upon layers of extra rules. And it's part of the reason student loans are so freaking complicated in the first place. So if you're paying attention, this thing's going to be a big deal if you're a public servant. For you non-public servants out there, I'm also going to talk about some other student loan updates more at the end of this podcast. So feel free to skip forward if this part doesn't apply to you about public service loan forgiveness. But I think it is useful to listen to, even if you're not a public servant, because I think it's going to give you kind of a tip of the hat of the way things might happen in the future with student loans, with other executive orders that might be passed or might be enacted. What does this PSLF order do? Remember I said payments that didn't count, loans that didn't count. And you have to be employed currently by a nonprofit or government employer while getting PSLF as well. And that review process sometimes takes a few months. If we think about all those different things, what the Biden administration effectively did is wiped away all of those requirements for 1 year and 1 year only, using executive authority derived from the national emergency of the pandemic, is what the Biden administration claimed. So I'll go into more detail about why he might have the authority to do that. That's kind of what happened is the Biden administration basically said, okay, if you have FFEL loans, all payments made on all kinds of FFEL loans now count for forgiveness. He also said direct loans, all payments of any kind made on direct loans now count for forgiveness. This is just for public service loan forgiveness, not for the 20 and 25-year versions. He said that payments made on loans before a consolidation now counts. And I'm saying it's not really President Biden that said this, is his Department of Education, right? Basically what they did is a teacher who has FFEL loans that's been making 15 years worth of payments on like the extended plan or the graduated plan and consolidates that FFEL loan to a direct consolidation loan is now eligible for forgiveness on the entire thing. This person has zero credit towards loan forgiveness under the rules, which are statutory. And now they could consolidate those FFEL loans and literally get the whole thing forgiven. You can also get extra payments that you made on direct loans before consolidation. Plenty of people, made a couple years worth of payments before consolidating, and then they consolidated and then realized they didn't need to do it, and they wiped out 2 years of payment credit for no reason. That's eliminated now. People who made payments, like I said, on the extended or graduated plan, basically any plan basically counts now. Any kind of payment that was billed for and scheduled that you made, even if it was late, even if it was slightly too much or slightly too little, that basically counts. My theory as to how they're going to go about this is they are going in phases. They've already sent out some emails telling people that they've got additional credit that they expect to add towards their public service loan forgiveness, 120 months of payments. They've already sent some of those emails out. They've only sent those emails out to people who have already submitted employer certification forms correctly and who had issues with payments that didn't qualify or employer credit that didn't qualify. I believe that was for consolidation loans that had been, applied for with public service loan forgiveness perfectly. Then they're going to go down the stack, and then they're going to do just direct loans, and they're going to go through FFEL loans. And that's going to take a few months. But you're going to get at some point an email from Department of Education saying the potential extra credit you might get towards public service loan forgiveness. So what is the details of this? What do you have to do actively to qualify? Well, they cannot do this automatically because of the fact that it's an executive action bypassing Congress. To qualify for this, you have to, 1, submit your employer certification form by October 31st, 2022. Next year, Halloween, 2022, not 2021, don't freak out. 2022, October 31st. You have to have submitted your employer certification form. In that form, you want to document all of your public service employment, basically of any kind, while you owed student loans. It doesn't matter, if you're making payments or not, honestly. I think that you should try to document all of your public service credit, that you've built up going back to the beginning of you borrowing, because who knows what exactly they're going to do and how they're going to handle it. October 31st, 2022. What's special about that date besides Halloween? Hopefully post-pandemic by that point. Gosh, I'm going to need somebody to send me a nice bottle of scotch to down if it's not over completely by then. But what is special about October 31st, 2022? It's right before the midterms. It's like days before the midterms. Is there a special reason for that deadline? It seems like what they're planning for with some recently released data from Department of Education is they're planning for a 90-day sort of grace, nice period window post January 31st, 2022, when payments start again. So they are very afraid of having a wave of defaults and delinquencies because it's, I guess, a bad headline. And I mean, more seriously, it could impact the economic recovery, I think. But Biden administration is basically saying, okay, servicers, for the first 90 days, you don't get credit for forgiveness for not paying, but we're not going to report you to the credit bureaus. In other words, they really want to try to help ease people in their payments without causing a big wave of defaults. I think they didn't want to do anything during that period because they just really want to focus for the first 90 days at getting student loan payments smoothly started up again. So February, March, and April are out. Then you're in May. Do you set the deadline for applying for this by then? Probably not, because servicers are probably going to be overwhelmed for several months after starting payments up again after 2 years worth of not making any payments at all. I guess that's why they did October 31st. They could have done September 30th because it's the end of the fiscal year, but also they're doing negotiated regulation process right now, which is going to change the PSLF rules for the future. And that has to be written by November 1st to take into effect the following year in July. So the very first change we'll see with permanent PSLF rules theoretically would be July 2023, unless they figure out a way to do it a little bit sooner. And my guess is that they set it October 31st as the deadline so that it could be before the midterms and so that they could make sure that if they messed up anything with their interim rules, that they could slip in an extra rule by November 31st that it would take effect with the following July's PSLF changes, which will further expand the program for future applicants. So this is exciting. This is very exciting. One of our consultants, Megan Landris, told me a story recently about a sort of a gratis consult she did for a friend of a friend, just in her neighborhood. He was a teacher, worked for 15 years, making payments on his old FFEL loans. Just figured that there was nothing he could do because he applied for loan forgiveness and got denied because he had the wrong kind of loans. And she told him, hey, you can now consolidate those with the government, and those payments are now eligible for forgiveness. You can get the whole thing forgiven tax-free. And the guy broke down crying. I mean, this is a big life-changing deal, especially for people in their 30s, 40s, 50s that might owe FFEL loans pre-2010 that they borrowed. One of the things that I like to ask immediately when things like this pop up is, could there be opposition to this that would result in a lawsuit that would shut it down? I don't think so. The way that somebody would go about doing this is they would file a lawsuit against Department of Ed claiming that they abused their power. So the most likely people to do that would be an ally of the party that opposes it, right? So congressional Republicans, some sort of group that's allied with them would be the one that would file a lawsuit to block it. The congressional Republicans have already asked for an urge for hearings as to how the Department of Education determined it had the legal authority to do this. And they were certainly very vocal on Twitter saying that they did not believe this was legal because this is going to cost a lot more than the Biden administration thinks it's going to cost. This is going to result in some eye-popping forgiveness numbers for public servants. So I think that the complaints, though, that I saw from congressional Republicans were more like complaining type of complaints versus we're going to oppose this with every means possible type of thing. Why is that the case? What they did is they made sure that they included a section about how military, active duty, and veterans who were deployed and had their student loans in active duty deferment, like deployment deferment, basically, which is what's basically offered to any military person that calls about their student loans, by the way, when they're deployed. That doesn't count for public service loan forgiveness, which is just a really mind-numbingly dumb thing. You get offered deployment deferment because you're not at all thinking about your student loans. You're thinking about fighting for your country, fighting in an active conflict zone. And then that credit didn't count for public service loan forgiveness. So they made an order that fixed that as part of that big giant order with public service loan forgiveness. And I think that's really smart because that's going to make that a lot harder to challenge this by people that would oppose this. Because if this was just purely seen as sort of a public sector union type of benefit, I think you'd see a lot of lawsuits from the traditional places. But what they claimed too in this order to do this and to try to shore it up from legal lawsuits is something called the HEROES Act of 2003. Now, when I talk about these kind of things, I talk about them as somebody who's an expert in student loans, not a lawyer, right? So certainly there's other people out there that know these statutes and know the rules way better than I do. But this is the plain English version of this. There's this act called the HEROES Act of 2003. It's what the Trump administration and his administration officials cited as why he had the authority to extend the student loan interest pause after September of 2020. He claimed that because it was a national emergency, that he still had the authority because of the pandemic to continue the pause on payments, even though Congress had not said that they were going to do that. So Biden used this specific act to say that there is a pandemic emergency still, there's a national emergency still, and therefore he has until October 31st, 2022, more than a year from now, to enact these temporary changes giving people more credit. And so since Trump administration officials have cited that authority and Biden's pointing to that more narrow authority, saying that's why he can do this particular action, and he's including the military, and would probably very likely use them as an example of why the legal challenge shouldn't go through, right? I mean, it's very, all kinds of stuff is political, right? This is a smart political move. But yeah, so I think that's kind of why I feel kind of confident that this is going to go through. I think that we would have seen a lot more loud opposition and immediate lawsuits to try to get a stay on this if people were going to try to do that. And the emails have already gone out telling people they're going to get extra months of credit towards forgiveness. So I think this is happening, y'all. Get excited. I don't like to say that about everything because I like to be a little cautious and warn people when something might not happen, right? I was kind of telling y'all, hey, if this 10,000 of student loan cancellation, happens, then don't get excited about it because I think that somebody would issue a stay and they would sue over it and then be a big fight, go up to the Supreme Court, probably get denied. And that's why I think that they didn't do it, because I think that that's kind of, they were just looking at what the composition of the Supreme Court was and how they probably wouldn't be able to get that through. For people who are public servants, this is even better than that because you're going to get credit for previous years of payments. You're going to get forgiveness. It is a little bit ironic because the person of color that works in, as a $15 an hour type, like home healthcare worker who works for a for-profit staffing company. She's got $10,000 of student loans in default. She's not going to get any relief. But a physician that had FFEL loans that wasn't necessarily counting on getting those forgiven is going to get all of it wiped. And it could be $200,000 and it'll get wiped. Is that fair? No. But the world's not fair, and the rules aren't written by you and me. They're written by other people, right? And so whenever the rules get written, however they're written, you should take advantage of these. I saw some people kind of posting online saying, I'm really excited about this, but I'm also I feel a little guilty because I'm a really high income person and I don't feel like I deserve this. And I think, while that's a nice sentiment to have, I think that, it doesn't matter what you deserve. It matters what the rules are. And you should not pay any extra taxes than what you legally owe. In the same way, you should not leave any loan forgiveness on the table that you qualify for just because you feel like it makes you feel weird. So be excited about this. Don't have guilt about taking advantage of this. I think this is something to get excited about. So we've already seen, like I said, some people get emails saying their payment counts are going to be updated by 4 months to 24 months, whatever it is. And this is for a more narrow audience that has really tried to get public service loan forgiveness very aggressively already. The PSLF help tool, though, has not been programmed for these changes yet. So if you look at your PSLF help tool, which is studentaid.gov/PSLF, it's going to look like your loans are not on track for PSLF, even if they are, because they haven't programmed this to update that tool for these big changes. It's also going to tell you a warning to get out of forbearance and deferment, but the COVID-free still counts right now. So, you cannot rely 100% on what the student aid website tells you because they don't have top-notch programmers on staff that can quickly go in and update a website when some big new ruling comes out like this, right? I think the timeline will probably be in the next few weeks. You'll start seeing more people get those emails. Eventually, the FFEL people will get the emails. One thing that I was a little kind of wondering about is there's FFEL loans owned by Department of Ed and there's FFEL loans owned by private entities. I was kind of a little bit wondering, if I was an FFEL lender that got billions of dollars of interest income that was going to lose a lot of that due to this order, would they consider, filing some sort of suit, and would they have any standing? I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's likely. I think that the way they issued this order, making it reliant upon national emergency authority, basically the only way they could challenge that would be to say, well, it's not a national emergency right now anymore. And I don't think that they're going to do that because congressional Republicans that opposed this were basically saying, this is abusing the national emergency authority discretion or something like that. So I think, in other words, they're not arguing that there's not a national emergency. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to try to follow this. Overpayments are going to be refunded, but only on direct loans. So if this change, so say you were on the extended plan for 3 years and then you switched to IBR on direct loans, then those 3 years worth of payments on the extended plan, you're going to get that refunded to you. And you're going to get that money back as a lump sum. You're literally going to get a check from the Treasury in the mail with potentially thousands of dollars or even tens of thousands of dollars because of this. So that's another cost that they didn't account for when they said how much this was going to cost. The Biden administration is just not accounting for that because there's no way to know for sure what that number really is. But it's going to be significant because they said on average, the typical borrower will get 2 extra years worth of payments towards public service loan forgiveness from this order. So if the typical borrower gets 2 extra years worth of payments, you're either going to get refunds of overpayments or you're going to get forgiveness sooner. So you're going to miss out on billions of dollars of payments on these loans, and you're going to push the forgiveness sooner. And that's important because I'll talk about that in a second. The caveat is it's not any payment counts no matter what. It's only payments made while you were employed full-time at a qualifying employer. I do want to say that. This is, again, only for public service loan forgiveness. This is not for 25-year IBR. This is not for 20-year pay or repay, right? This is only for public service loan forgiveness. So if you were on the extended plan for 3 years, then you switch to pay, and you're planning to get your loans forgiven in 20 years, this order does not benefit you. So I just want to be clear about that, just in case I get questions about that. Now, there are potentially more changes on the way. I don't know if these will be able to affect people with past employment or if they'll only affect people with future employment, but it's something to follow. That the negotiated rulemaking process could expand the definition of an eligible employer to include some of these not-for-profit hospitals that hire for-profit physician groups or nursing groups. That's something that could be happening. Certainly, if I was a Kaiser Permanente doctor in California that worked for a nonprofit hospital but was employed by a for-profit physician group, I would not be refinancing and paying off my loans right now. I'd keep them federal just in case for the next couple of years, just to see what happens with these PSLF rules with qualifying employers. So what's going to happen next? The cost of this forgiveness is going to freaking soar. It's going to soar so much. It's going to cost way more than the Biden administration has stated publicly, because if they had stated what it was going to cost publicly, they probably would have maybe been incentivized some lawsuits. I'm guessing maybe that's why they didn't state it. So how do I know this? Let's take a look at the FFEL loan portfolio. The FFEL loan portfolio is the stuff that could be eligible for forgiveness potentially right away, because all of it has been around at least 10 years, because it stopped in 2010. So by definition, it's been around for 10 years. Are people in default or delinquency on these loans? No, most everyone, like 90+% of people, are in continuous repayment on these. There's a very high rate of people actually paying these loans. If you think about what are the numbers, there's $240 billion of FFEL loans out of the 1.7 trillion total. There's 10 million borrowers that owe this. So out of 10 million people, on average, 25% of our workforce is public sector. That's nonprofit and government included there. So out of 10 million borrowers, probably 2.5 million would be public sector workers. In other words, out of the people that owe FFEL loans, 2.5 million of them could be eligible for forgiveness immediately. Now, granted, labor force participation rate is not 100%, right? It's like 63 or something. Also, people don't stay employed in the public service continuously. People might bounce around, and also maybe some people are underemployed or something. So maybe instead of saying 2.5 million, maybe you take half of that number and say like 1.2, 1.25, just to account for like the labor force participation rate not being 100% and people not sticking with public sector employment for a cumulative number of 10 years. And so if you take a quarter of 10 million people, maybe cut that down again by half for the reasons we talked about the labor force participation rate not being everyone, then the number you get on the FFEL is about 30 billion. And with direct loan borrowers, many of those folks it's not going to impact them getting forgiveness or not. It's just going to speed it up. So in other words, that forgiveness that might have happened in 2023, 2024, 2025, instead, it's going to happen in 2021 and 2022. In other words, that cost is going to be brought forward, and the average additional credit people are going to get, it's about 2 extra years of credit towards the 10. So remember, I have said in some blog posts and podcasts in the past, there's something called the PSLF effect. I should trademark that, right? Or PSLF snowball effect, PSLF snowball effect. And what it is there's going to be an exponential increase in the applications for PSLF approved every single year until the budget for PSLF forgiveness, the cost of PSLF forgiveness is in excess of that of NASA every year. That's because the FFEL loans were issued back in the day. Direct loans were a very small amount of loans that were issued. And then gradually the direct loan program took over more and more. In 2008, 2009, certainly a lot more direct loans were issued as FFEL borrowers kind of closed up shop or reduced their capacity. And then in 2010, the direct loan program took over completely. What's going to happen with PSLF is you're going to see, instead of this 1% approval rate, you're going to see a massive amount of approvals, like an absolutely massive amount of approvals. It's going to be tens of billions of dollars at a minimum. I could even see it getting up to like 100 billion forgiven by the end of 2022. So a lot of this forgiveness is going to be brought forward. It's going to be moved up. So what does this guarantee in my mind? I think that this is going to result in a political fight over this in the 2024 elections, possibly even the 2022 midterms. Because people, what are they always freaked out about? What are people that talk about PSLF always scared about? What if they repeal it, right? Because it feels like too good to be true. It feels like really generous, especially for higher income people. And it's like, well, why would it be, why would we have this forgiveness program for physicians, but not for, I don't know, pick a lower paying occupation that's important, home healthcare workers that work at a for-profit staffing company. Let's think about what could happen if there is a backlash with, say, a conservative takeover of Congress in 2022? Well, what could happen worst case? Well, we know that there will be a Democratic president through 2024, right? Biden will be president until then, at least. After that period, so you know that there's nothing that can happen with PSLF through that date because President Biden would have to sign off on it, and his administration just drastically expanded it. So PSLF's definitely not going anywhere until 2024, and a new president takes over in January 2025, right? So really, you could say January 2025, absolutely no danger of PSLF changes at all. After that, say you had a complete takeover of Congress and the White House by Republicans, then those changes that they could potentially try to do would not be able to change until at the earliest July of 2025, and that's if they pass an act of Congress. If they try to do it through executive order, they have to go through negotiated rulemaking. It takes a year. They have to get it finished by November to have the order taken into effect by the following July. So if they do it through executive order, that means PSLF wouldn't be changed until July of 2026. So basically, anyone who's in college right now is fine because you'll be grandfathered in. If you're already enrolled in a school, your borrowing will be eligible for PSLF, even if they cut it off for people in the future. The people in high school that might want to become doctors right now are the ones who might not get PSLF. And why is this? Again, I think it's because costs are going to soar, and anything that's expensive is just going to, especially if it's kind of viewed as benefiting higher income earners disproportionately. You have to think that even Democrats might look at that and say, wait a second, I thought this was supposed to be going to disproportionately to nurses, firefighters, people like that. If you look at the average debt forgiven, it's typically somebody with a graduate degree that makes a higher income, significantly higher income than average. This is something that we might see pushback from private sector employers that will have a harder time hiring people. Think about labor shortage complaints in the economy right now. What happens when a for-profit hospital chain like HCA has to offer physicians an extra $50,000 of salary to take their offer over an identical offer from, a Catholic hospital because of the PSLF benefit? I mean, real talk, they'll be pissed, right? I mean, like if you're a for-profit employer and you're going to have to pay a lot of extra salary to recruit people because your nonprofit competitors have like an awesome loan forgiveness benefit paid for by the government, your lobbyists are going to probably contact people and start to work in getting you either included in that program, which is probably the ideal for these employers, or you're going to try to eliminate it because you're pissed off that you have to pay extra for salaries. So right now, only the best informed employees have been upset at changes in hospital tax statuses that make them ineligible for PSLF. Like there was one, I think, in Asheville that got bought by a for-profit group and all the people lost PSLF, and there was this big uproar among the few people that understood what was going on. And then the administration was just like, we'll just give you a $5,000 signing bonus or, something like that. They didn't obviously have any clue what they were doing. They didn't know about PSLF. And then with so much misinformation out there, a lot of people think it's not even real. Well, guess what? When there's tens of billions of dollars going out the door for people that work in public service, people are not going to think that way anymore. It's going to be very real. And people will start making labor market decisions based off of PSLF broadly, because you dip your toe in the water when you think something is a thing, but then when you see your friend you went to medical school with tell you, I got my loans forgiven like completely. I had a conversation with somebody recently. She's like, I just cut down to 0.5 because I just got my loans forgiven. So now I can drop down to 0.5. You don't think that that's not going to come up in conversations and people are not going to make decisions based off of that? And, if you think about some of these low-paid public defender and prosecutor type roles that really pay very little compared to the benefit to society they provide, if you factor in public service loan forgiveness, this is like, that could be an extra $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year in sort of phantom salary, which could really significantly enhance competition to be a public defender and a prosecutor, compared to maybe working at a small family law firm, which could cause labor market issues as well. So there's no need to worry about this program if you qualify. I want to emphasize that, right? I told you that there's nothing possible they could really change negatively about PSLF until January of 2025 when there's a new president. But the new president couldn't day one eliminate people from using it because they'd have to do it through Congress, and Congress certainly wouldn't pass anything before the summer. And then, even if they did executive authority, then executive actions take, like this process currently, regulations take a year at least to get in place. So you really don't have to be super worried about loan forgiveness if you're kind of in the mid 2020s getting it. Afterwards, remember, it's going to be, if it's even eliminated, I'm not sure actually it will be. It might just be continuously expanded. And like I said, they might loop more groups into qualifying employer status to protect the program more, right? It's a lot better to have more people defending it than fewer, right? So you might see these for-profit employers try to carve out inclusions in the qualifying employer rules. But, assuming that doesn't happen, any kind of potential for PSLF ever going away is always going to be for people not yet enrolled in a program. There was a popular personal finance personality that recently went on air and shared more misinformation, in my opinion, about how, quote, loan forgiveness is a scam. It's not happening after this announcement. And this is my opinion, so they can't, attack me for saying my opinion. But I think that that's going to look really dumb, really stupid in the coming year. All this advice about you have to pay off your loans because loan forgiveness is not a thing. You can't trust the government. What a bunch of hogwash. I mean, when you start seeing people, public servants specifically, get all of their loans forgiven, that's going to show how foolish that view is, in my view. I think paying off debt is great. I guess I should say I'm heavily financially incentivized for you guys to refinance your loans. We give a whole bunch of those commissions that the companies give us back to you in those $1,000 cashback bonuses to lessen any conflict of interest, and also just to get you better deals, because that's why I do student loan planners, to try to have you have like a better life free from anxiety with your student loans and just try to get you to that financial independence and living your best life, part of your life, as soon as possible. But yeah, but I want to give you the best advice. I don't want to give you advice that's lousy, advice that's biased. And part of that is you got to check your own opinions on things. If that's one thing that's a little frustrating is when these personal finance people are like, you have to pay off your debt. It's your moral obligation. Well, it's well, are you taking Social Security? Are you going to claim Medicare? Those are programs that are really underfunded and are not paid for and are going to burden future generations. And there's maybe a good argument to make that if you have the means to not accept them, that you shouldn't. So are you doing that? Oh, you're not? Well, then shut up about people getting loan forgiveness that you think should pay it back, because you're a hypocrite, in my opinion, if you're taking Social Security and Medicare, because, people always say, my mom even says that, she's like, well, I paid for it. It's well, no, you didn't. I mean, if you look at the actuarial statistics on it, maybe you paid for 20% of it or 30% of it or 50% of it or something. That's kind of a random aside. So just be aware that there's going to be a lot of noise around this, right? There's going to be a lot of loud opinions about public service loan forgiveness due to all this kinetic stuff going on. And in the middle of this too, also think about how a lot of other stuff with student loans is changing in this next year as well. We'll get into that in a second. What is not changing about this part, about this order? The 2025 year forgiveness stuff. So the 2025 year income-driven forgiveness is really not changing at all from these executive orders. And that's unfortunate. For whatever reason, they're not doing anything about it. I think the reason is because Department of Education does not even track progress towards forgiveness for 20 and 25 year programs yet, because the first big eligible batch is in 2031, which is about 10 years away. That's 20 years after pay got invented. IBR was invented around 2009. There's 25-year programs. That's 2034. So the first big batch of people that could get 20 and 25-year forgiveness is not for more than 10 years away. When they passed PSLF, they didn't get their act together and coming up with an employer certification form to track credit until 5 years after they passed the PSLF law. And that was with the 10-year countdown. So they only got their act together 5 years before the first people were actually going to be submitting for it. So it wouldn't surprise me to maybe see Department of Ed in the mid-2020s come up with a 20 and 25-year forgiveness tracking program, but they don't have that currently. So I think that's probably why Department of Ed didn't do anything about this, is because they just thought, well, let's just target it at public service. That's going to capture a lot of our first responders, a lot of our healthcare workers. We can say that it's because of the pandemic. We can do a whole lot of the cancellation that we really want to do, but we can't because of political and legal constraints. So let's do it this way. Now, does this affect refinancing or paying off loans? Only for public servants. So if, you are at one of these Kaiser Permanente for-profit physician groups, right, that works at a nonprofit hospital but didn't qualify because you have the wrong name on your W-2, those groups need to pause on paying off their loans and just go income-driven repayment for those. People that are public servants that had loans from a long time ago, if you haven't already paid off your loans or already refinanced your loans, you should not do so at this point. You should look to qualify for this PSLF benefit by seeing if your loans are direct. If they all are already direct, you don't need to do anything except submit your employer certification form. If some of your loans are not direct, like they're FFEL before 2010, you might need to do a targeted consolidation of only those FFEL loans to qualify them as direct loans and then submit the employer certification form. So it's one step if you have direct loans, two steps if you don't. And if you refinance your loans, this is another situation where they screwed you over because there's no money to reimburse you if you refinanced FFEL loans that you did so because they didn't qualify. So for example, like me and my wife, we refinanced some of her FFEL loans that didn't qualify or we had to have a lot of extra years worth of payments. Looks like we could have gotten forgiveness, so, and also we would have had standard 10-year payments, but those would have been suspended for 2 years because of a global pandemic. So I could have added that to our savings. I'll say this though, because our savings rate is good and we invest and save a lot, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? Loan forgiveness, when we're doing consults, we show people that, hey, loan forgiveness at best is going to save you maybe 2 or 3 years off your retirement date. That's a big deal. You don't want to drive into work for 2 years for nothing. But increasing your savings rate can shave that down by 15, 20 years. So it's just like apples and oranges. And so when you have anxiety, it's like, well, do you have anxiety about your savings rate? Because if you don't have anxiety about your savings rate and your savings rate's not good, then like that anxiety is very misplaced. So once the wheels are turning on the student loan restart, it's not going to stop. It's already kind of to that point. January 31st, 2022 is when everyone has to make payments again. That's when payments and interest start up again. Refinancing is still very smart for the vast majority of people who work in the private sector and expect to owe less than what they earn at some point in the short to medium term. Also note that I'm seeing increasing interest rates on refinancing, also on mortgages. So you have 30 days in most cases to accept an offer that's presented to you with a student loan refinancing company. The best thing to do, I think, would be to apply like right after New Year's for a student loan refinancing, get the rate offer, confirm that you're eligible for the $1,000 bonus with sending our team an email, and then waiting to pull the trigger until January 30th or January 31st or something like that, because that gets you the maximum 0% interest subsidy while also getting you 30 days extra ahead of other people that are going to apply all at once. That's another thing I'm a little concerned about with refinancing is for people that it does make sense to pay off your loans, which is still a whole lot of people. The people that it does make sense to pay off your loans, those are people that might be applying at the same time and might fill up the capacity or the buckets for whatever low interest rates that the lenders are willing to offer. And so they might jack the rates up as they get more demand than they had anticipated. So you also shouldn't wait too late to apply for refinancing if you know that's what you need to be doing after January 31st. This is not something that they're going to pause, this payment restart, unless you had a worse wave than even Delta. And I think politically, they really want to move towards normalcy just in general for midterms and political purposes. And just because that's what we all want is to move towards normalcy. So that's just a couple thoughts on refinancing. I think that it's something that people need to be really aware of and tracking because interest rates really are seemingly starting to increase. And you just want to be able to lock in historically low rates if you're going to be planning on doing that around January anyway. Other news, Navient got a contract renewal offer and then immediately said that right after it that they don't want to keep servicing loans and they want to transfer to Maximus and they want approval to do that. When I heard that, I thought, Maximus, where have I heard that name before? Oh yeah, I like corny early 2000s action movies like Gladiator. So there's all these memes online of like, are you not entertained? Remember that line? So, I don't know. I was just thinking about coming up with memes, social media memes about like Maximus taking over people's student loans. I don't know. It's just kind of a silly thing. So will Navient stick around longer than expected? Because initially I said that they're going to be ending their contract around the same time as FedLoan. That was before this news of this new secret contract got leaked. Here's what I think might happen. I think Navient might stick around until 2023, collect some extra millions of dollars in servicing revenue. I've also seen some stuff from readers that have said things like they're going to not certify people's income again until like 2023, and they're just going to go off of whatever your most recent IDR payment was until that point. I don't know for sure if that's what they're going to do, But if they do, that's really interesting because I wonder if they're doing that because they got guidance from Department of Ed, or if they're doing that because they just want to be lazy and they don't want to hire call center staff and processing staff to process all these, and then they can just sort of say, we're going to allow you to pay a lot less or something. I'm not sure. It's a speculative opinion on my part. I don't know. But some people made less money in 2021 and 2022. So keep in mind that you also want to be able to get a lower payment if you potentially qualify for that. There's also some potential action coming out of the White House on certifying income, allowing a temporary year of self-certifying your income over the phone. Whoa, boy. When you ask what someone earns, if you ask your buddy that you're trying to brag to, you're going to say a number before a lot of deductions, right? And if you're asking somebody you want to not know how much you make, you tell them the number after taxes, or you tell them, so there's going to be millions of people that if they go through with this rule, when they're asked for their income, instead of providing a tax return, they're sort of going to call up and they're going to tell them a number that's actually lower than what they're supposed to be paying on. I mean, this has happened in the past too, when people don't provide information about K-1s or bonuses that they get. And that's not legal, by the way. It just doesn't get caught sometimes. We'll give you updates on that because this is very tentative. I just thought I'd mention that. It is intended to help out people that are more lower information borrowers, right? Less educated borrowers that are really struggling, might have gone to a for-profit school or dropped out of community college or something, right? That even submitting a tax return is just like an extra step and it's a little technical. So it's like, if you could just call somebody and how much do you earn? Oh, I earn $15 an hour. Oh, well, what'd you make approximately on your taxes? Oh, not very much, maybe like 10,000, right? So those are kind of the conversations that I think that they want to have to get people back into repayment to speed up the process and avoid defaults. But again, this kind of, just like the pausing in the payments and interest, it's the kind of benefit sometimes it's intended for one audience, but it ends up way disproportionately benefiting a different audience. So we're going to talk about that. So we're trying another thing out for October that I wanted to share. You might know if you're a client of ours that have gotten a student loan plan from us, we have a refer a friend program already for our consult service where we give you $100 for referring somebody to our consult service. They just got to mention your name in the booking form. Now we have rewards for getting people to sign up for our weekly newsletter update. So you know that goes out on Thursdays. I send it each week. And at the bottom of that newsletter update, you're going to see a personalized link that you can use and share either on Facebook or on via email, or you could just get that, copy paste that personal link and then share it with a friend, text message. You could also share it on a Facebook group. If you get one person that signs up, you get some free investment tools that I built. If you get 5 people, you get a free forgiveness tracking tool that tracks payments towards this PSLF waiver, which is really kind of exciting. It's a tool that I've never given out for free, and I built a better version of it, and we're giving it out for free to people that get 5 of their friends to sign up for the newsletter. And then whoever refers the most friends to the newsletter in the month of October, which is almost over, is going to get $500 cash. Look out for that, because I think, maybe a little biased, but I think that our updates can save people thousands of dollars. And that's a really big deal. So I would love for you to be able to help out your friends and maybe get some rewards for doing it. Another quick note, just to let you know, the great labor shortage of 2021 is finally hitting Student Loan Planner. I have, at the time I recorded this, mid to late October, I have 2 appointments for the rest of 2021. I didn't realize that until I looked at it the other day, and it's kind of like a little bit with the holidays, but a little bit with demand from after the PSLF waiver announcement was made. We saw a massive amount of bookings because of that, because I think people are really worried that they're going to do something wrong and miss out on it. I think I only have about 10 appointments available for the entire month of January. Now, this is me. This is not the consultant team. The consultant team has more availability, thank goodness, because I tried to prepare for this. It's been a year, y'all. I mean, you've obviously been through a whole bunch of stuff, and I don't know what that is, but maybe if we ever meet up for a beer or a cocktail, you can tell me. But, I was expecting payments and interest to start again September 30th, and I wanted to be prepared for that of 2021, right? And so I went and tried to hire 2 new consultants, and we did that. And then payments and interest didn't start. And it's like, oh boy, good thing that I'm running a mission-driven for-profit business rather than a pure profit-only for-profit business. Because, we want to be able to be there for you and have you get a plan without having to wait forever to get that. But consultants are getting a lot more booked up. And I think this is mostly due to the PSLF announcement. And I think that this is maybe a fraction of what it'll be when payments and interest start up again. And there's a lot of problems with servicers transferring. So people certainly can apply for this PSLF waiver with filing your employer certification form, consolidating any FFEL loans on your own. But it seems like from our booking information, people really want help on this. So I wanted to remind you that you can book a student loan plan 60 to 90 days ahead of time on our calendar without a credit card. You don't need a credit card to reserve a spot. So you can go to studentloanplanner.com/book if you want to reserve your spot to get a plan with payments starting again. So if you want one of those January spots, I only do Fridays. And so if you book a 400K plus event on a Friday, you'll get me. If you want to work with our rest of our team members, in some cases they have almost as much experience as I do. And in some ways, some of them are actually even better, I think, because they stay really up to date with some of the procedural stuff with the loan servicers. And we have team meetings, just to let you in behind the curtain, every few weeks or every couple weeks, where we have all of our consultants just kind of hold office hours among each other. And we bring different hard cases that we had the past couple weeks, and we talk through them and walk through any like administrative or political things that we see coming with student loans. Just to make sure that everybody's really up to date and giving the best advice. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of us versus sort of other groups that might be like one-man shops, or maybe they have a bunch of people, but they're a broad financial planning firm. Is like, we only do student loans. We've got a big team of people always seeing different kinds of stuff, and we're able to use all that group knowledge to try to find the best plan for you, regardless of what's going on in your life. So I really enjoy those times with my fellow consultants, but I know that they're going to get really booked up. And I went to brunch the other day with my wife. We tried to go to brunch the other day with my wife. The line was all the way wrapped around the building for just like a very large outdoor kind of beer garden type of place. And I was just like, holy crud. And there was a bakery that they had next door. And so we were just like, well, do we really need like beautiful, like runny eggs with, a nicely baked croissant? Or can we just be happy with going over and getting that nice muffin in the bakery? And so that's what we did. And so I guess the equivalent with student loans is like you just go try to kind of self-provision a little bit, but maybe you're worried you're going to make a mistake or it's not going to be as good as getting a plan. So we'd love to help you. And we could actually have even more benefits for clients coming down the pipeline. They're going to be free in the future. So I'm excited about some of these things. We'll announce them on the podcast and in the email newsletter when we have them. But great plan, great time to schedule your plan, even if it's a few months out. I'm Travis with Student Loan Planner. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. And if you want to leave your specific questions, studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. We'll answer a few more questions in future episodes. And thank you so much for listening.